Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Travelers Championship Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into, forecast to look at least early on this week for Cromwell, Connecticut. We have a lot of previous leaderboards that we want to dig into, figure out what metrics and perhaps what filters we want to focus on this week for TPC River Highlands. It's going to be an exciting show, and towards the end of the show, I will show you a little bit of the research that I did today that I posted on social media. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It is simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. Of course, my Twitter and Instagram, where I posted the research earlier today that I have found for TPC River Highlands and the Travelers Championship going back quite a few years. So if you want to see the summary of that research and the players that qualify or meet the criteria of the previous winners, go on to your preferred social media site, and I've placed that over there. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards every week for the PGA Tour. So if you want to see the wagers that I make on the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at Twitter. And Twitter is also where I do my baseball content, quick hitting, 3 up, 3 down, where I provide 3 players that I think will provide their value and 3 players that I don't. So if you want to see quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter as well. And then finally, Gabe's Twitter is in the description. Consider going to give Gabe a follow. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. We've been working pretty closely for the past couple of months, and it's no coincidence that both of us have had a bit more success, I should say, with 2 analytic minds working together. So consider giving Gabe a follow and subscribing to his article, The Fringe. And then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. If you weren't able to make last night's show, especially since it was very, very late in the evening as I was watching the U.S. Open, want to hear if you had a successful U.S. Open in terms of wagers or in DFS. Did you have Wyndham Clark? How did your contest come out? And then have you fired off any wagers for the Travelers Championship? I certainly have. When the odds came out this morning, I fired off 3, in fact. 3 numbers and players that I liked at those values. So I want to hear from you all. What players are you looking at intently, closely to start your week? And then what metrics and what do you know of the course of TPC River Highlands? So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 Travelers Championship. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Monday evening with a quick look at WinFinder. And at least 2.5 days or so out from the tournament, Thursday doesn't look to be too much in terms of wind. Now, Friday, a little bit perhaps more into the afternoon, but Saturday looks like the wind could really pick up. At least, again, 2.5 days away from the tournament. So not going to do a whole lot in terms of wind, but it is certainly something to keep in mind as you move forward through the week. Keep an eye on the weather forecast for Cromwell, Connecticut. Perhaps wind will be a factor, and we will update this Wednesday night at the beginning of the show for the DFS Tactics to see if we want to factor in any wind consideration into players and whatnot. And of course, by that time, the tee times will be out, and we'll have a better idea if we want, or if there appears to be an AM/PM wave favor. But there's a look at the early forecast. Perhaps a little bit of wind in Saturday, but I don't see a whole lot Thursday. And then Friday, perhaps very late in the afternoon, turning into the evening, perhaps the wind picks up. But nothing drastic that we would definitely need to focus on for tonight's show. So with that, we will move to Fantasy National and do a quick recap of a few things that we looked at, particularly in the strokes gained page view here at Fantasy National. One of the first things that will cross your mind or hopefully comes to mind when thinking about TPC River Highlands. This is a very, very short course, 6,852 yards. So definitely going to want to be looking at some short course metrics. I'm going to have to expand the timeline to give players in the field this week enough rounds to make it significant, which while that loads, no field changes and in terms of players withdrawing from the Travelers from last night to tonight. The qualifiers for the tournament have been settled, and then Min Woo Lee, thanks to his top 10 at the U.S. Open, is playing this week, but no field changes in terms of players withdrawing. Just a few adds, the biggest name being Min Woo Lee. I believe there were a couple of sponsor exemptions. Paul Haley was one of those. I don't remember the other one. So no further players to have to write off the list going into this evening. But in terms of on short courses, and again, short courses being defined per Fantasy National as less than 7,200, clearly TPC River Highlands doesn't even come close to approaching that threshold. So your top total performers on short courses in the past 2+ years: Patrick Cantlay, Russell Henley, Seamus Power, Xander, John Rahm, Corey Connors, Sung Jae, Scotty Scheffler, Hideki, Victor Hovland, and Matt Fitzpatrick. Another key filter that we will be using a little bit tonight is the Pete Dye filter. TPC River Highlands' original architect is Pete Dye. It was renovated by Bobby Weed a few years later, but the original designer, the original architect is Pete Dye. So we are going to be looking at some Pete Dye metrics this evening, your top total performers in terms of Pete Dye designs the past 2+ years: Sung Jae, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Brian Harmon, Corey Connors, Xander, Shane Lowry, Matt Fitzpatrick, Colin Morikawa, and Tony Finau. So a couple of quick reviews there from last night's show. I will move this into this calendar year, take a quick look at some approach, some off the tee perhaps. But first things first, let's take a look at strokes gained approach. What I think is the most important shot type in golf, and even though it is suppressed in value this week, as we saw from the course breakdown last night in Fantasy National, still going to be important. This is a Pete Dye course. Strokes gained approach are always going to be a factor. So your top strokes gained approach players this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Ricky Fowler, Tom Hoge, Sepp Straka, and Gary Woodland. I think the last thing we want to look at in terms of strokes gained, I'm going to back this all the way out to the beginning of 2019, and let's gather the Bent and Poa Annua courses that will make up the subset of data we want to look at. TPC River Highlands has Bent and Poa listed as its surface types, so we need to grab 4 courses that will make up the set of data we want to look at. First is Detroit, the host of the Rocket Mortgage. Second is Oakdale, and even though it is not a continuous course on the PGA Tour, we just saw this 2 to 3 weeks ago for the Canadian Open, so it is fresh enough that we definitely want to include that in the subset of data we want to look at. Third of the 4 is Silverado, the host of the Fortinet, used to be the Safeway. And then finally, we will grab TPC River Highlands, of course, where we are this week for the Travelers. Those 4 courses are what are going to make up the putting statistics for me this week. I can't say continuous courses. Detroit, Silverado, and TPC River Highlands are continuous courses. on the PGA Tour. Oakdale has not, but certainly with it being only 2 weeks ago, we want to look at who perhaps performed well there in terms of putting. So your top putters on bent and Poa annua surfaces, and I didn't do this last night, but I might in fact include the fast green speed filter. Like I said, I didn't do this last night, but the past several years you've seen every single round has been fast here at the Travelers. I don't think that's going to change. The reason why I'm a little bit hesitant is that historically they have had a few rounds of average and even slow the first year we gathered data at Fantasy National. But the past 6+ years or so have been listed as fast. I think that is enough of continuous listing of fast to be confident in that. So with that, we are looking at fast, speed, bent, and Poa annua greens. And you can see, in fact, Oakdale is not even listed in fast. So I am quite curious here. Let's look at the RBC Canadian just real quick. A side or a little tangent here. I want to see. Okay, so those green speeds were average. Interesting. I guess we can look at both. There's the breakdown. Started closing out of some of these tabs. So we'll first just look at bent and Poa annua. No green speed filter at all. Just flat out bent and Poa annua. And I think this is going to be a pretty solid base. Although I think I would prefer the fast bent and Poa annua. But your top putters going back to 2019 on bent and Poa annua surfaces have been Tommy Fleetwood, Kevin Kisner, Harris English, Bryce Garnett, Zach Blair, Justin Lauer, Sahith Theegala, Xander, Denny McCarthy, and Adam Long. Of course, Tommy Fleetwood, runner-up, losing in the playoff at the RBC Canadian Open. You see he gained 9.2 on the greens there. Let's see, who were some of those other players in the top 10? Justin Lauer, tie for 25th. You see he gained 7.9 on those greens. Let's see, other players. I know I'm going to be skipping back and forth here. Sahith Theegala, Bryce Garnett, Kevin Kisner. See if we can't find where these players are. So you see Sahith, just under 6. Garnett, he gained almost 4. And that's the recency bias there, in the sense that this is the Canadian Open. Now, these are the average speed greens. They're not fast, and I think the Travelers are going to be fast. But this is at least the same surface, so I did want to make sure I included Oakdale in that. However, let's move to adding the fast green speed filter, in which Oakdale is going to drop off. So now only 3 courses will make this set of data. Of course, TPC River Highlands, where we are this week, Detroit Golf Club, host of the Rocket Mortgage, and Silverado, host of the Fortinet. Your top putters in the past 5+ years or so, since the beginning of 2019, on specifically fast Poa annua and bent greens. Those players are Harris English, Bryce Garnett, Kevin Kisner, Denny McCarthy, Xander, Adam Long, Tommy Fleetwood, Mackenzie Hughes, Patrick Cantlay, and Chesson Hadley. So the first 6 or 7 here, the same in terms of in the top 10 in both. Ordering changes a little bit. Kisner is now 3rd. English rises to 1st and whatnot. Fleetwood falls to 6th, but still very, very good, fast bent and Poa annua putters. But 3 new names rise into this top 10. Mackenzie Hughes, Patrick Cantlay, and Chesson Hadley. And Chesson Hadley is quite interesting because he really lit up the Travelers last year in terms of putting. And we'll see this on the previous leaderboards a little bit later on in the show. But Chesson Hadley, 6.3. Michael Thorbjornsen, 9.5. Xander, 8. So, and there's Sahith Theegala again. Kevin Kisner. These guys have shown time and again that they are very good on bent and Poa annua surfaces, whatever speed that they are rated at. So there's a look at your top putters, specifically on fast, bent, and Poa annua surfaces. So I wanted to make sure I showed both. Having seen Oakdale not included in the fast bent and Poa annua, I'm starting to waffle a little bit now. Maybe I do just look at bent and Poa annua no green speed filter. Moving into my analysis tomorrow and making the mixed condition model for Wednesday and all that stuff. Starting to think again about that, considering I know I want to include Oakdale in the set of data for putting, since we just saw that course and quite a few of these players played there at the RBC Canadian. But anyway, that is a look at some quick review from last evening. We're not actually going to leave this page view, although I am going to remove the specific courses because I think we're going to want to look at some off the tee and some around the green with a couple of different filters. So I'm going to set that up here in preparation. Let's take a look at some of those historic leaderboards. We'll take a look at 2 or 3 of them, see if we can't find some patterns. This is last year's Travelers Championship, in which Xander wins. I've highlighted the top 18 here. Just convenient for ties. About the same number of players lose strokes across the 4 major strokes gained categories. 3 in off the tee, 2 in approach, 4 in around the green, 4 in putting. Now your top end winners are very, very heavy into the putting, and we saw that all last night in the course breakdown in Fantasy National. Off the tee was certainly a fairly big emphasis, at least graphically. So we see here, if we sort on it, you've got your cut makers for sure, but nothing extreme in terms of correlation. You know, the leader, 64th, so our clunker of a made cut. You have a top 25, middlings. You do have some elite finishes here, but nothing direct correlation. Irons, much more direct, as you can see. Top 20, runner-up, 8th, top 20. Your winner's very high up here in approach. Round the green also, at least per Microsoft Excel, was showing that it was a consistent force for the players who have played it well continuously throughout the years. You see, you have some pretty big spike performances, but you also have some missed cuts. That's why I thought the 28% that it was showing against the average full field course was a bit misleading. That is certainly one way to play the Travelers, because these greens are small. You're going to have to be using some around the green a little bit, but I thought it was a little bit misleading. It was more so off the tee and putting, and you see some very strong correlation here in the putting. Thorbjornsen was your leader in putting. A clunker of a made cut from Jonas Blixt, but you see, even with him having, just absolute shit irons last year, he still makes the cut because a decent off the tee week, and he lights it up with the putter. Xander, 3 main. Kevin Kisner lights it up with the putter last year, and he has a very strong finish. KH Lee, Harris English, Chesson Hadley, we talked about. So putting going to be a major, major factor this week. Off the tee, the same, I believe. Not necessarily as much as the putting, but I do think we want to look at some off the tee metrics. If we look at 2021, just very, very quickly, you're going to see a lot of the same, I do believe. This is, again, the top 18 just convenient for ties. We have 3 players negative in off the tee. A lot more negative in approach, but really only one was real terrible. That was Bryce Garnett, but you see what he did on the greens, gaining 13.9. I mean, just video game type numbers on those greens. But you see in the top 18, look there, not a single player in your top 18 from 2021 was negative in putting. It's just a major, major deal here at the Travelers, and that's why I spent a little bit of extra time on the putting this evening for you, looking at both just Benton Poa Annua and filtering down to the fast. So with that, we can take a quick look at perhaps off the tee, maybe some off the tee on short courses. So let's go ahead and do that. When a course is short, since the beginning of 2021, your top off the tee players have been Corey Connors, Sung Jae, Cam Davis, Scotty Scheffler, Hayden Buckley, Patrick Cantlay, Cam Young, Tyler Duncan, Luke List, and Russell Henley. Not sure how I feel about using Pete Dye, because this is a pretty unique Pete Dye design. So instead, let's just compare that list that we just saw with your top off-the-tee performers this calendar year in the field this week. So those players are Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Rory, Luke List, Gary Woodland, Cam Young, Corey Connors, Hayden Buckley, and Garrick Higgo. So maybe a couple of names here. I remember Connors, and I remember Buckley. Maybe Cantlay was up there. I can't quite remember from the short course filter, but a whole list of new names here, including Garrick Higgo, Cam Young. So perhaps the short course is the way we want to go with that, considering Russell Henley was somebody that was in the top 10 for off the tee on these short courses, and it's somebody who has really played the Travelers well. Yeah. Oh, shoot, that's approach. My apologies. But yeah, I mean, he's still top 10. Luke List, Tyler Duncan, a different name there. So there was Cantlay, there's Cameron Young, Buckley, Scheffler. So there are a few more. There's about 5 here that overlap with just the 2023 Connors and Scheffler, Hayden Buckley, Cantlay, Cam Young, Luke List maybe, but a few new names here, especially Russell Henley, who's played this event well, Cam Davis rising on the off the tee on short courses. Interesting to note that, as I think we are coming to the portion of the schedule that I truly think Cam Davis is going to break out a little bit here soon. Interesting to note that. Not going to, I mean, we're probably going to look at a little bit of around the green, but not a whole lot, because I still think it's a bit of an outlier. But one thing we definitely know about TPC River Highlands, the rough is going to be long. It always has been long. It's always going to be long. They keep it that way. Very similar in style to what we just saw at the U.S. Open, and a lot of fescue, bluegrass, and whatnot. So your top around the green players in long rough since the beginning of 2021, Tommy Fleetwood, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Danny Willett, Matt Fitzpatrick, Ben Griffin, Kevin Streelman, Matt Kuchar, Jason Day, Cam Young, and Kevin Kisner. So there's a look at the strokes gained page view. Let's go ahead and look at some more specific statistics, shall we? Let's look at some driving. And last night we noticed that distance really doesn't matter. There's a lot of forced layups here. Bombers can have success. It doesn't prevent them from winning here. Dustin Johnson has won here. Jordan Spieth was never the longest, but he wasn't short either when he won. Trying to think of a few other names. Xander, of course, not short off the tee by any means. So it doesn't preclude you if you're a bomber from winning, but it's not necessary by any means. And as you see, probably roughly half of the players were negative in driving distance last year in the top 18. Now, it looks like a lot of the players were negative in fairways. There's a lot of negative 1/10ths here. Hadley, Stallings, Scheffler, negative 1/10. But the overwhelming, most important metric in this page view from last year is the greens. 12.1 from Xander. I have to imagine he led. Yeah. Top 25 from Steele, Scheffler, top 15, Keegan, Neesmith, Haas, Reavie. All of these guys very, very good at hitting the greens last year, and were very, very high up on the leaderboard. So if we sort on these, there's the greens sorted. Not as strong a correlation as I might have thought, but certainly, not nothing. Kind of the same with the fairways, although I think the greens had more elite finishes. There's a couple of aces, 2 seconds down here, a little bit more. Yeah, greens are a little bit more strong than the fairways, I would say, from last year. If we sort on the distance, again, you can succeed here doing that. But I mean, Johnny Vegas, a very high miscut. Dylan Fratelli, a high miscut from last year. A little bit further down, Curtis Thompson. So not necessary to have distance. And if we look at 2021, probably see much of the same. Top 18. Some of these numbers, except for maybe Brooks and Jason Day, those two are some pretty big numbers in terms of distance, but 14 and a half over 4 days, that's not a lot. 31, 37, 26.6. Not big numbers in terms of distance, even if they are positive. Again, greens, only 3 players negative in terms of greens, and Bryce Garnett was the one that was atrocious at 3.3. The others are 0.3 in the negative. So greens a big factor. If we sort on it, again, not direct correlation in terms of your first, going first, second, fourth, third, fifth, eighth or whatever. But there are a lot of strong finishes here. Top 10, top 30, not great, not terrible. Runner up, 2 top 15s, top 25, top 10. Your winner, a little bit further down, but still performing strong in the greens. So the most important facet of this page view of the driving tab, I believe, is going to be greens. You got some big numbers here in fairways as well. So I think both are going to be in play and things that we want to look at. So I'm going to set this, get that ready for the next thing we want to look at. So for this year's field, let's see. If we're looking at fairways, do we want to look at short courses? Do we want to look at Pete Dye? Do we not want to have a filter? It's kind of up for debate. Let's kind of look at this just in totality since the beginning of this calendar year. Might give us a good baseline to start. So our top fairways gained players this calendar year: Aaron Rai, Russell Henley, Adam Long, Ryan Armour, Siwoo Kim, Ryan Moore, Lucas Glover, Austin Eckroat, Brendan Todd, and David Lingworth. Give me a second here as I grab my note from last night of the players who have withdrawn, so that way I don't lead you astray. The 4: Taylor Montgomery, Alex Noren, Aaron Wise, and Dylan Fratelli. So we haven't come up with them yet, so I need to make sure I'll skip them if they show up in the top 10 of these various metrics. Austin Eckroat, decent with distance and gaining a lot of fairways. Our top is Patrick Cantlay, 30th in distance, 14th in fairways. A little further down, Hayden Buckley, Scotty Scheffler, at least decent at distance while gaining fairways at a good amount. So there's your top fairways gained players this calendar year. More importantly, your top greens in regulation gained players this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Xander Schauffele, Corey Connors, Colin Morikawa, Wyndham Clark, Will Gordon, Aaron Rai, Stefan Jaeger, and Joseph Bramlett. Not sure. I'm much more confident in using something, say, short course greens in regulation as I am short course fairways. Not sure what I'm going to do yet with fairways gained. I think it needs to be a part of the mixed condition model. I'm not sure if there's a filter that needs to be and which one it would be. But On short courses, your top greens and regulation gained players. Russell Knox, a former champion here at TPC River Highlands, 2016. Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Corey Connors, Russell Henley, someone who's played this event very, very well, not having won it, but played it very well. Adam Svensson, Matthew Neesmith, Luke List, and JJ Spawn. There's your top 10 greens and regulation game players on short courses. Important note, Adam Svensson. I can't call it a direct comparison course, but his win this fall at the RSM, a short course, a course with smaller greens. So makes a lot of sense to see him there as well. We can take a look at fairways on short courses. Don't think that would hurt anything. I don't know if that's the way I'm going to go in my mixed condition model, but your top fairways gained players on short courses: Ryan Armour, Ches Reavie, Aaron Rai, Brendan Todd, Jim Herman, Russell Henley, Sung Jae, Tyler Duncan, Hayden Buckley, Russell Knox, Kramer Hickok, and Brian Harman. So only 2 players with a decent amount of distance on short courses while still hitting a lot of fairways. So don't think I'm going to do anything with sand saves. Don't think I'm going to do anything with scrambling, especially since scrambling is relatively benign here. It's not that it's easy, but it is easier than the average tour event. If it was much harder, that might be something I would want to look at. But I'm thinking I'm just going to look at around the green for anything short game or scrambling related. All right, so there's a look at the driving tab. Again, I don't know if I want to do anything with the Pete Dye filter for fairways or greens, because this is a fairly unique Pete Dye course. Short course makes a lot of sense for greens. Long rough, I just really only feel comfortable with it around the green. Fairways, difficult or easy. I mean, you can see they're generally easy, although 2 rounds did play to difficult last year. The wind did pick up a little bit. But they're generally easier to hit because there's a lot of forced layups. We saw that in the driving accuracy from last night. So I don't know if I want to look at when fairways are easy to hit. I just don't feel terribly confident with that. And there's nothing to look at in terms of scoring relative to par. So I think that's the way I'm leaning towards how I'm looking at the Travelers in terms of the fairways and greens page view. Let's look at scoring. And nothing stood out last night in terms of Microsoft Excel, whether there was going to be birdies or bogeys, which made a lot of sense because this course generally plays to about average. -1 is the cut line. 4 of the past 5 years. Most of your winners are in the 14 to 18 range, which again is about average. So not sure if we're going to be finding much in birdies or bogeys, but we can take a look here. Let's see, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So of the players that finished in the top 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7. Slightly preference to the birdies, and I think that's what we saw last night in Microsoft Excel, but it's not overwhelming by any means. And you see Eagles really aren't a thing here except for maybe the short par 5 on the back. You would expect pretty strong correlation from birdies gained in the top of the leaderboard. If we compare, just kind of looking at a quick snapshot of the placement finishes for birdies versus bogeys. I mean, your winner led in bogeys avoided, but he was actually more into the birdies gained. It looks like birdies gained had a few more elite finishes. Yeah. So I don't see anything terribly convincing, at least from last year. Let's look at, I went to 2020, then I went to 2022. Let's look at 2021s, see if we can find anything that perhaps might clue us in onto something. Bogeys, birdie, birdie. Yeah, again, fairly evenly split between the birdies and the bogeys. Now, the leader in birdies gained was a very big clunker of a made cut, but then you had elite finishes right behind him. And then in the bogeys, you had a lot of the elite finishes up here, but then you have 2 missed cuts very, very high. So I don't see a whole lot here in terms of scoring. And when that is the case, we're going to go to proximity next. When that's the case, I like to look at opportunities, and particularly opportunities on a short course. We know TBC River Highlands is short. Generally speaking, you're going to have a lot of shorter irons and wedges in your hands. So on short courses, going back to the beginning of 2021, your top opportunities gained players have been Cam Young, Hideki, Shane Lowry, Corey Connors, Russell Henley, Eric Van Rooyen, Emiliano Grillo, Colin Morikawa, Keegan Bradley, Justin Thomas, and Grayson Sigg. So as of right now, that's where I'm leaning for scoring this week, is in these opportunities. I think Pete Dye would make some sense in terms of opportunities. Players that are adept at perhaps playing, these small Pete Dye greens well, their approach shots and all that. So your top opportunities gained players on Pete Dye courses, going back to the beginning of 2021, Colin Morikawa, Ryan Armour, Keegan Bradley, Justin Thomas, Cam Young, Victor Hovland, Russell Henley, Kevin Streelman, Gary Woodland, and Emiliano Grillo. So a little bit of overlap here on some of these players now. Russell Henley has been up there a whole lot on these various metrics we've been looking at tonight. Cam Young has seemed to be on a lot of these metrics. Justin Thomas, who has been really, really struggling lately, seems like he's been up there a few times. Eric Van Rooyen, very, very close. I believe opportunity is the first time we've mentioned him tonight. So there's a look at what I'm thinking about in terms of the scoring page view in Fantasy National. I'm looking primarily at opportunities. However, I can see an argument for looking at birdies or better, particularly on short courses. So your top birdies or better gained players on short courses since the beginning of 2021. Patrick Cantlay, Cam Young, Cam Davis, Seamus Power, Taylor Montgomery. Oh, excuse me, no, he's withdrawn. So let's try that again. Patrick Cantlay, Cam Young, Cam Davis, Seamus Power, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Stuart Sink, Victor Hovland, Ben Griffin, and Ben On are your top 10. Skipping Taylor Montgomery, he has withdrawn. So yeah, I can see a scenario or an argument to look at birdies or better. I think I'm leaning opportunities so far, on a Monday evening, knowing that I'm not going to make my mixed condition model until tomorrow or Wednesday. All right, we can prep this for proximity. This is one of the big things that I like to look at every week when we have the opportunity, especially since proximity seems to be my weakest in terms of golf analytics. Majority of your approach shots come from 150 to 175. You do have a few from 200 plus, but 125, 150, 150 to 175. Those are where your approach shots are coming from here at TBC River Highlands. And yet last night, at least in Microsoft Excel, we saw that the 150 to 175 really didn't matter at all. So let's see what we can discern looking at some prior leaderboards. So last year, again, top 18, 150 to 175. Look, it's JT Poston was immaculate from that range. Scott Stalling was immaculate from that range. Scotty Scheffler. But your winner was quite heavily in the negative. Chesson Hadley was bad from that range. More so positive than negative, sure, but there are several players that are negative from that range. Several players negative in the 200 plus. If we sort, total procs starts off decent, eighth clunker, then second, kind of falls off right after that. Although your winner is decent in total procs. 150 to 175. Look, you got several miscuts very high up here in terms of performance from that range. 200 plus, I'd argue, has been the strongest so far, at least for your elite players that have been at 200 plus. But you still have some players that were miscuts that are high up here. Skachewski, Cam Champ, Seth Reeves, Molinek, Shank. I don't see a whole lot here. 2021 and proximity. Top 18 just for ties. Again, look at the 150 to 175. Your top 8 were all negative. Majority of your top 18 were negative from 150 to 175. So if you see something, jump into chat and if you think I'm overlooking something, but I don't see anything that would correlate performance from 150 to 175 and success here at TBC River Highlands, other than the fact that the majority of your approach shots come here. But it doesn't look like that really matters. So that's how I feel on the proximity. So I'm going to skip it, and if it ends up being more important, then put it in the comments, or you can yell at me next week that I led you astray. But I just don't see it. Let's move to par threes very quickly. We saw last night, at least in the course breakdown, from your top 10s, your top 5s, your winners, par threes are pretty deflated. If there was a range, it was the two 150 to 175s here, 150 to 175s here that were more important than the two 200 to 225s. So we'll see if we can't gather something here. Now, Xander played them very, very well last year. He probably led. Yeah, he led the field in par 3 performance. He played both of those ranges very, very well. But beyond Xander and maybe Thor Bjornsson, you have a couple of miscuts really, really high up here that performed well on the par 3s. A few more a little bit further down here. 3.8, 2.3. A lot more correlating other than Trey Mullinex, but a lot more of your cut makers and good finishes are in the 200 to 225. So right now it just kind of looks like par 3s, at least if we were to base this solely on last year's. And then 2021, par 3s, top 18 again. A few players played them okay. Much more so in the 200 to 225. If we sort, again, you have some pretty bad performances in terms of total, your leaderboard position. I don't feel great about that. 4 from Kadira, but not a lot of correlation. 2.1, not a lot of correlation. I don't see a whole lot in these par 3s, just being honest. So I'm just going to look at total par 3. And if that changes, I'll explain it Wednesday night on the DFS Tactics show. But your top par 3 performers this calendar year: John Rahm, Christian Bezadenhout, Ricky Fowler, Scotty Scheffler, Max Homa, Siwoo Kim, Sam Ryder, Robbie Shelton, Ben Griffin, Tommy Fleetwood, and Adam Schenk. Making sure I don't have any of the filters selected. I do not. All right. So there's your top par 3 performers. We're going to go to par 4s. They're going to be very, very important. 75% of your par 4s fall from 400 to 450. You have 8 par 4s from 400 to 450, 8 of the 12. Remember, TBC River Highlands is a par 70, so we only have 2 par 5s. But you see, even from 2021, I meant to go to 2022, apologies. par fours, look at your top 5 here: 9.5, 9.5, 10.5, 10.5. Thor Bjornsson still played them well, just not. He didn't light them up like these other top 5s did. Second, fifth, 35th, first, second, eighth, 2 top 25s, 6th, 4th. That's just extremely strong in terms of correlation. Extremely strong. Like Wyndham Clark, even though he only finished 35th, look at his performance in that 400 to 450 range. Very, very strong. If we sort on that, he led the field with JT Poston. So again, look at all these premier performances. 35th, middling finish, but still decent. Second, 8th, 25th, 4th, top 20, 8th, 13th, 19th, 1st, 8th. Huge deal here at TPC River Highlands. 2021, much of the same. If we sort on the par 4s, 2nd, 5th, 3rd, 13th, 25th, 1st, 4th, 5th, 5th, 10th. Huge amounts of correlation. 400, 450. The numbers aren't as big, but still, 2nd, 5th, 13th, 4th, 5th. Now, your winner didn't play the 400 to 450 nearly as well as some of these other players. He actually played the 2 450 to 5s very, very well. So perhaps some of the longer 400 to 450, say the holes that are 440, 444, or whatever, and throughout the week get moved into the 450 to 5 because of tee and pin placements, perhaps. But still a fairly strong correlation between par 4s and 400 450. So for the players in the field for this year's Travelers, your top par 4 performers this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Jon Rahm, Jason Day, Wyndham Clark, Tony Finau, Max Homa, and Denny McCarthy. At the specific range here at TPC River Highlands, 400 450, your top 10: Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Jason Day, Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau, Thomas Detry, first time we've said him tonight, Cameron Young, Rory McIlroy, that is, Tommy Fleetwood, and Brendan Todd. First time we said Brendan Todd tonight. Quite a few players overlap here. So Scheffler, Rahm, Jason Day, Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau, those 5 players are top 10 in both par 4s or par 4s in total and the specific length. Here at TPC River Highlands, several honorable mentions. Like Rory's 11th in total par 4s, 10th at the specific length. Victor Hovland 4th and 13th. Max Homa 9th and 15th. Denny McCarthy 10th and 17th. Just very, very huge amount of the mixed condition model this week is going to come into these 2 things. Par 4s are going to be important. This range of par 4s is going to be extremely important. Putting is going to be extremely important. That's where I'm leaning towards in my mixed condition model. Finally, or lastly, before we move to Microsoft Excel, let's take a look quickly at par 5s. Don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as the course breakdown made it look last night, as there's only 2 par 5s. You see, even like the top number here is a 3.3 from 2021. If we look at last year's par 5s, I mean 0.9 from your winner. The highest is a 4.9. He did play. Hardy played him well. English played him well. But you do have a miscut fairly high from Gostkowski, who played the par 5s extremely well. Skins, Gim, both. They played them very, very well and still missed the cut. So I think it'll be a minute factor in my mixed condition model. I don't think it's wise to completely ignore them, but I don't think it's necessary to put a lot of weight into them, even though they are the leading strokes gained hole by par. So our top par 5 performers in the field this week for the Travelers, top par 5 performers this calendar year: Jon Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Wyndham Clark, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Xander, Tommy Fleetwood, Ricky Fowler, Dylan Wu, and Matt Kuchar. All right, that's a good segue. I'm bringing this back to the strokes gained page view in case we want to look at. Let's go to Microsoft Excel. Let's start with the comparison course, and we'll go into the detail this evening. Last night we took a look at the course evaluation versus the average full field course. Tonight, let's really dig into the numbers here for the Travelers. You see the main strokes gained shot type here is putting, and we saw that graphically. We saw that in the prior leaderboards. It's all about putting here. Now, this strokes gained approach number, yes, it is the second highest. I'm going to tell you that is a very, very small number for strokes gained approach. Very small number. So it is mitigated here in terms of importance, even though this is a Pete Dye design. You see somewhere like the Memorial, it's almost a 3, 2.65 at the Charles Schwab, 3 exactly at the Wells Fargo. Here we are at 2 1/3 essentially. Just not that big of a deal at strokes gained approach. The tee and the around the green are fairly close, but this is a pretty high outlier. If you remove that, it comes a lot further down. And I'm just curious, it brings the around the green all the way down to like 9%, where it was 28, I believe. Off the tee has just been fairly consistent. 182 high-ish outlier, 122 somewhat of a low outlier. It kind of balances out. Off the tee has been very consistent, so definitely a portion that I don't want to ignore. We'll have off the tee, have a little bit in around the green, a lot of putting, and look how consistent putting has been. The highest is a 2.68, the lowest is a 2.48 in 5 years. That is an extremely consistent metric. Putting is just going to be a big deal. Distance, you've had a couple of years where it's mattered, but generally speaking, it doesn't. Fairways is a very, very low outlier. This is going to be a very big number. Almost 2, and it moves it to like 38% more important. Yet the greens are still the most important. You see 1.99 here in the fairways, a 3.3 in greens. So off the tee wise, I'm definitely going to prefer the fairway gained players. But that's why we took a pretty big look at greens in regulation. Because it's a very consistent metric the past 5 years, and it's important here. It's not going to show it as much in terms of percentage. It's only 6% more important here, but generally greens are important across the PGA Tour anyway. There we go. You can see the fairways and the greens. Generally, greens are pretty important across the PGA Tour anyway, so the fact that this is still above full field course average, greens are going to be something, and it's been very consistent. I like seeing consistency as a statistical person. Looking at birdies and bogeys, I know it's going to show that the birdies are more important, at least in terms of the raw number. They're pretty close, and they're both pretty close to full field average. The bogeys have been extremely consistent, with the exception of this one low outlier. You've had 3 years where birdies were big deals and 2 years where they weren't big deals at all. So again, I don't feel, kind of like behind the reason why I don't like using the average scoring to par filter for some of the metrics. I prefer when it's easy or difficult. That way we know and we have a good feeling that it's going to play difficult, like the U.S. Open, like Bay Hill, or easy like the Byron Nelson, easy like Kapalua. I just don't have a good feeling for scoring here. So I'm thinking opportunities. Maybe birdies are better, maybe, but not a whole lot to see here. These are pretty average numbers across the PGA Tour. Moving into the 3s, the 4s, and the 5s. As soon as Excel decides it'll save. 3s, fairly consistent. You do have a pretty big outlier here. If there is a range, it looks like it's the 150 to 175, but even then, it's only a third of the total. So we're looking at just total par 3s is what we're looking at. And even then, it's going to be pretty small These par threes they are not contributing a whole lot in terms of the strokes gained. I'm going to skip the fours just for a second, just so I can compare the threes and the fives for you all, and then why I think the par fives are not going to be important either. You see 1.38, where the par threes were 1.35, so they're very, very close in terms of overall importance. Now, 2 years of pretty low outliers, sure. If there's a range of the par fives, it's the one that is 500 to 550, but again, only one of those par fives fall into there. There's only 2 on the course, so looking at just total par fives, and I just don't see a whole lot of importance there. Instead, look at these par 4 numbers. 5.0, and pretty darn consistent. 5.3 being the highest in terms of distance away from average. Like 5 is a huge number. Let's see, the par 4s are 13.5 or so percent. Let's see, you got the Wyndham, which is another par 70 with only 2 par 5s. The Wyndham's number is a 5.05. So, and par 4s are paramount there. Travelers 13, we had a 10%. Okay, Wells Fargo 21%. I want to see what the highest actual par 4 number is. Wells Fargo's a 5.33. So, I mean, Travelers is up there in terms of this total par 4 number. Going to be a pretty big part. And look, 2.42. It's almost half of the total of par 4s, but look at it compared to all the others. It's doubling the importance of the 0 to 350. It's 4 times important, or 4 times the importance of 350 to 4. It's 3 times the importance of 450 to 5. So we're going to single out the 400 to 450s this week in the mixed condition model. We're going to have quite a bit of emphasis here and here. And like the par 4s, 400, 450, 2.42, these par 4s are more important than the par 5s and the par 3s, all of them. It's a big deal here at TPC River Highlands. Last thing I'll show you is the proximity. I know the raw numbers won't mean much, so I will bring us to the comparison. This is why I struggle with proximity. Majority of approach shots here, 150 to 175, it's negative. It's negative in terms of importance. Now the 200 plus are actually fairly important, 22%. But you only have 2 par 5s, so you know you're factoring that in for the players that are going for the green on those par 5s. But you only have 2 very long par 4s from 450 to 5, so I just don't know. I don't foresee proximity being something that I want to look at. All right, there's a look at TPC River Highlands and the Travelers from a raw data perspective, specific to the course. Before we go to the early look, let's look at my mixed condition model for the Travelers last year, and it was pretty bad. And that's being kind to myself. This was an awful mixed condition model. Half of my top 20 missed the cut, whether they withdrew during the tournament or right before it. But my number 1 player missed the cut, Neiman, Hoagie. So I have 1. I'm going to count these. I don't know if they withdrew during or before, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, exactly half of my top 20 missed the cut. That is awful. That is atrocious. That is, that means if this was continuous, if I had 50% miss on my top 20 every week, I shouldn't do this for a living, is how I'll phrase it. The only saving grace is that I did have Xander 16th, and he wasn't exactly the most popular. Fairly high on Kisner and Poston. And of course, Poston wins the next week at the John Deere. And he was very, very unique. So he was just outside my top 20, but this was not a very good mixed condition model. And I think I know why. You see, par 4s, I had quite a bit of weight. I did look at birdies gained, and I looked at birdies gained on short courses. One, I don't think we're going to be looking at birdies gained in general, and I don't think short courses is the way to go on a scoring metric. I think I should have done birdies gained just in general, or picked a lane of either average or of easy or difficult. So that's why I really like combining a scoring metric like birdies gained, birdies are better, eagles, whatever, with a scoring metric like easy to par or difficult to par, because it just doesn't produce good results when you start mixing. I did have 2 different strokes gained totals. So there's 20% that I'm definitely getting back. Well, really 30%, but 20% automatically getting back. I did look at short course performance, and I looked at Pete Dye performance. I had 10% around the green and long rough, so that's something that I can easily see, repeating. Here's where a lot of this was wrong. I had 10% on POA, and the vision will be skewed. I'll take you back to my Fantasy National very quickly. Looking at these historic conditions, the past couple of years were listed as POA. So that's why I went with POA, even though it was bent. Because this is bent and POA-ANA now, and a lot of this is attributable thanks to Gabe for helping me know which courses have the bent and POA-ANA surface. Will be much, much better prepared for the putting portion of our mixed condition model this year, because we will be able to look at just the bent and POA-ANA surfaces, the Rocket Mortgage, the Silverado, the Fortinet, Oakdale, etc. So that's where a lot of this was pretty bad. I did have fairways gained. I looked at it in long rough. I don't know if I like that per se. I did single out the 400, 450. I only have 10% in that. That needs to rise. Only 5% in approach. That makes a lot of sense because it is deflated in importance here. 5% in opportunities. I looked at opportunities on short courses. That makes a lot of sense. I believe that's what we did tonight. And I only have 5% in par 5s. So there's a look at the metrics and the filters that I had. Let's see how predictive they were. So the par 4s, let's see, the last thing you can see is putting. So we have quite a few off to the side here. So the best one is par 4s. This is a 52. It's not great, but is what it is. So this was the best around the green. Remember, I used around the green and long rough. That was the second best at a 53. Approach was a 57. Par 5s were a 57. So those 4 were the best performing in terms of predictable or predicting results. If you look at the 2 strokes gained totals, this is short and this is Pete Dye. Short course strokes gained total far outperformed the Pete Dye strokes gained total in terms of predictive. Is that an outlier? Is that a 1 year samples? I mean, you don't know, but at least for the Travelers, short course far beat the Pete Dye. You see, birdies gained was really bad. It was not very predictive at all. So that was a big portion of the mixed condition model that just helped contribute to 10 of the 20 missing the cut. Putting, just talked about how we needed to look at bent and POA-ANA surfaces. In my defense, I didn't know which green or which tournaments had that surface last year. So this will be much, much better. But you see, it was clearly incorrect just to look at POA. Fairways gained, not very great. But I'm still leaning that way and towards off the tee. And I just think off the tee needs to be in there in the mixed condition model a little bit. 400, 450 was okay. It was okay. Opportunities gained, kind of middling. So there's a look at the mixed condition model that I had from last year. It was very poor. We're going to have a lot to improve on for this year. And hopefully, even though we do... I do feel like we're going to use a few of these metrics and filter combinations. Obviously I'm not doing anything with strokes gained total this year. I'm going to take away the birdies gained. We're going to change this filter on the putter and really hone in on the exact surface types for these correlating courses. Yeah, par threes need to be in there maybe at 5%. Off the tee needs to be in there some kind of percentage. So there's a look at last year's mixed condition model. I have a lot to improve upon. All right, we're going to end the show tonight looking at the early look file. This is the tournament history, the Strokes Gained Total tab, however you want to look at it or phrase it. Looking at performance specifically at TPC River Highlands the past 5 years. Let's take a look at a few different things and who has performed the best here. We'll start with off the tee, and then we'll go to putting. We're going to skip irons just because we're going a little bit over time. Your top off the tee players the past 5 years here: Rory at a 4.2, Victor Hovland, Kramer Hickok is 2 for 3 here. There's Patrick Cantlay, Ryan Armour 5 for 5, Xander, your defending champion, Justin Thomas, although he's not played the Travelers all that well. You see 2 for 3 with an average finish of 73rd. Bo Hostler 2 for 5, Tyler Duncan 5 for 5. Scheffler's been fairly decent here. Stuart Sink, Luke List, only 1 for 3 in making the cut, but has been off the tee pretty good. So there's a look at the top off the tee players at TPC River Highlands. We'll sort on putting. Again, this is going to be a big part of the mixed condition model. Your top putters the past 5 years here at TPC River Highlands: Thor Bjornsson, only 1 year. Scott, only 1 year. Tommy Fleetwood, who was there quite a bit on the Bent and Poa Anna top 10 from Fantasy National. Kevin Kisner, Adam Long, Bo Hostler, Harris English, Bryce Garnett. Even though Bryce Garnett has not fared well here, he has putt well here. It's interesting to see. Mark Hubbard 3 for 3. Denny McCarthy, not the best in terms of performance, but his irons are a lot better now. Denny McCarthy might be somebody I'm keyed in on. Just a bit of foreshadowing. Xander, Brian Harmon, Tagala has always putt this surface well anytime he's been on it. Kramer Hickok, Ryan Armour. So there's a look at your top putters. Let's look at greens. Greens gained. Your top performers in the past 5 years at TPC River Highlands: Aaron Rye, only 1 year. There's Brendan Todd. Matthew Neesmith, he's only 1 for 3, but he's gained a bunch of greens for what it's worth. Andrew Putnam, 3 for 3, somebody that I think probably suits TPC River Highlands pretty good. Xander, defending champion. Russell Henley, you see 3 for 4, average finish of 50th. He's got a lot of good finishes. He had 1 bad year here. So Henley is somebody that I really like this week. Jason Day, Ryan Armour again up here. Bramlett, Herman, Keegan 3 for 5. Lonto Griffin 3 for 4. Victor's 2 for 2. So there's a look at your top greens and regulation gained players. Going to skip the scoring and the par 3s. Let's go into the par 4s because I do want to look at 2 different things in here. Your top par 4 performers and the 400 to 450. Top par 4 performers: Xander, Brian Harmon, Brendan Todd, Kramer Hickok. Boy, he has popped on a lot of these for specific at TPC River Highlands. Kevin Kisner, Tagala, Fleetwood, Ches Reavie, a former champion here, 2019. Adam Long, Mark Hubbard, Zach Johnson, Kevin Streelman, Rory. Lastly, in terms of specific TPC River Highlands performance, 400 to 450 par 4s. Again, Thor Bjornsson, Adam Scott, only 1 time. There's Tommy Fleetwood, Scott Stallings, Kramer Hickok again, Xander, Russell Henley, Sahith, Brendan Todd, Kevin Streelman. Matt Fitzpatrick's only played here once and he missed the cut. You can see there, 0 for 1. Kevin Kisner, Ches Reavie, Brian Harmon. Again, distance does not matter here. These 3 guys are never going to be positive in driving distance. There's more than one way to get around here at TPC River Highlands. Jason Day's played well here. Tyler Duncan, 5 for 5. Martin Laird, 3 for 3. Rory, 3 for 3. Average finish inside the top 15. Zach Johnson, 3 for 4. All right. I'll bring you back to the best average finish. I promised you I would show you a little bit of my research. If you want the full explanation, I ask you consider giving me a follow over at the social media of your preference, Twitter or Instagram. But I do want to show you the winner matrix. I believe this was pretty well received when I showed it. I believe it was for maybe the U.S. Open, maybe the Canadian Open, Memorial. I can't remember. I've slept since then. But this is what I call the winner matrix, showing performance at that course before a player has won. Now, you see some missed cuts here, but the one thing I want to highlight for you all, Xander, he had a couple of top 20s. Now, he didn't play it in 2021 and then comes back and wins, but he does have a top 20 historically. Harris English has a top 20 and a top 25, but a top 20 really. Dustin Johnson had a 31st and a 34th, so he a slight bit of an outlier in that regard. Ches Reavie, he had a 25th and an 11th. You see Bubba Watson, he won this event twice, had a 2nd and a 4th before he won. Jordan Spieth won his first time he came here. Russell Knox, a top 20. Actually, a top 15. Kevin Streelman, a top 10. Some amount of success is needed here at the Travelers. It's pretty consistent. Pretty consistent with what you will see from the previous winners. Doesn't have to be recent. And showing like Xander didn't even play the previous year. Harris English didn't play at the Travelers the previous year. But at some point in your career, you've had to have had a pretty high finish at the Travelers. Again, Spieth's a bit of an outlier here. He wins the first time he plays it. DJ didn't have the highest of finishes, but he did have a modicum of success. So there's the one piece of research that I'll show and explain a little bit into detail. If you want to see a lot more of it, go to Twitter or Instagram, and I give you the 12 players that satisfy all of the criteria that I find, not just performance at TPC River Highlands, although that's a part of it, but all of the criteria that I have found from every winner going back to, I believe it's Russell Knox in 2016. But I will, in the show off, bring you back to the early look file, show you the players who have played this event. Oh, I went by finish. I went by events. My apologies. It's a good thing I caught that. I wanted by finish. There you go. Bring you back to the performance specifically at TPC River Highlands. The amount of times they've played in the past 5 years. The average finish. Whoa, what in the world did I just do there? That was weird. Events. Average finish. How many times they've missed the cut in the past 5 years. That's going to do it for the Data Dive for the 2023 Travelers Championship. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, and listening. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel by subscribing, commenting on videos. I always appreciate it. Hopefully, I've provided you something, a little bit of a nugget of information that you can use in your preparation this week, whether it's in terms of wagers or in DFS, to have a slight bit of an upper hand on our fellow contestants moving into the next designated event on the PGA Tour, the Travelers Championship this week. So thanks again for all of the wagers you've made this week for the Travelers Championship, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Travelers Championship. And until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.